Hey, so the audio in this video is not the best. I did my best to try and fix it, but if I re-recorded the whole thing, I probably would have ended up scrapping this whole video. So I apologise in advance for any oddities with the audio. I am planning on fixing this for future videos I make. To say the news of Pokémon Legends ZA shocked and surprised me would be an understatement. After years of waiting, we were finally getting a new game delving into Mega Evolution and Zygarde, a Pokémon which since its messy implementation into Sun and Moon, had basically remained untouched and sat in a weird space amongst a pantheon of legendary Pokémon. Not to mention bringing back a mechanic I adored since it was first introduced in X and Y back in 2013. Personally, I feel the game has more than delivered within its base game, expanding upon the already existing lore surrounding AZ, bringing us a new cast of characters who rival some of the best in the series, and providing a new group of Mega Evolved Pokémon who, for the most part, feel like they have been here since the concept was introduced. The news of DLC for ZA, specifically focusing on Hooper and Hyperspace, got me a little concerned, but really curious as to how they would expand on the concept and lore surrounding one of my favourite mechanics Pokémon has ever introduced to us, as well as what Hooper's role would be. Within this video, I will be discussing the gameplay and story of Pokémon Legends ZA Mega Dimensions, and my personal thoughts and interpretations of what we learnt. Be warned, I will be discussing spoilers. To begin, I want to discuss what I feel is the weakest element of the DLC, the gameplay. A big strength within the base game was the gameplay loop of the ZA Royale. Spend the day catching Pokémon in wild zones, spend the night challenging trainers within a battle zone to earn points to challenge a trainer in a promotion match. Given how well designed the gameplay loop was within the base game, you would hope a similar loop would have been used for the DLC's hyperspace mechanics, but alas, the gameplay loop was easily the worst aspect of Mega Dimensions. Personally, I feel the gameplay loop for Mega Dimensions is a step down from what we have in the base game for ZA, in no small part due to the major grind needed. To start, the leveling up beyond level 100 was a major part of the marketing for the DLC, and is done by making donuts with Antia from berries you gather, whether they be from normal Lumios or hyperspace Lumios, to strengthen all the Pokémon within your team. You get to choose which donut you feed Hooper when you enter a portal. However, nothing within the gameplay justifies the need for the series to go beyond the 100 level cap. It feels less like a much needed change for the series, and more like something added for the sake of satisfying people who have long expected this change. Had they given us a reason beyond the arbitrary level increase for the hyperspace pockets we visit, such as giving us additional moves or potentially even base stat increases tied to those higher levels, I honestly think it would have justified the need to go beyond level 100. Like, imagine taking an Emolga above level 100 and as a bonus for reaching level 150, they now have a permanent increase to their speed stat from 103 to 113. This may seem like a small increase, but that 10 stat difference could mean the difference for a lot of Pokemon. Additionally, until you manage to obtain the highest level donuts, a majority of the time you will be jumping into hyperspace with a very small window of time, being around 3 to 5 minutes. This can make things quite stressful if you're trying to complete all 3 of the challenges the game gives you each time you hop in. This creates a very steep difficulty curve very early on, and at least in my experience has not yet plateaued, which makes the grind for the best hyperspace berries very tedious, especially when the types of berries are random from the sources. This creates a very steep difficulty curve for early on, and at least in my experience, has not yet plateaued. The sources for the berries are the large floating Pokeballs found throughout hyperspace. However, they yield a small number, and you can only really increase the number they give you when you have reached the later stages of the DLC story and obtained the ability to make donuts with up to 8 berries. You can also earn a bonus golden Pokeball which spawns berries by completing all the challenges within hyperspace. But given the aforementioned time limit and the potential size of the pocket you may be in, you could very easily miss out on finding the golden Pokeball and lose those berries. The challenges are important to the progressing of the story, as you need to obtain a certain number of points to complete the surveying of hyperspace by doing the challenges. The number of points gets progressively larger with each rogue Mega Pokemon you need to save. However, unlike the ZA Royale in the base game, where everything you did worked towards increasing the points you need to challenge the promotion match, the challenges are the only source of points, meaning you have to complete multiple runs even for the earlier surveys. As for the longer ones, you will be genuinely stuck grinding for much longer. As of my rewrite of this section of the script, I have still not completed the 70,000 point survey, and I dread the length of the one after that. There is also the issue of rifts not always telling you what Pokemon will actually spawn inside. So, for example, you may see one that has Cyclizar as a Pokemon listed to be spawning there, only to discover there's none within the rift and instead there's Phantom. This is bad for Pokédex completion because it means there's a potential of you spending hours trying to find a specific Pokemon, only to be constantly not finding them because the rifts have a different species instead. That being said, the battle system in ZA remains unchanged and carries over all the pros it brought. This includes the boss battles against rogue Mega Evolved Pokemon, which all presented a very good challenge and surprised me with some of the typings, such as the first rogue Mega Pokemon you save, which forced me to rethink my entire strategy. I do understand that this is not everyone's cup of tea, as there are people who were put off by ZA changing the battle system from the classic turn-based combat the majority of the main series games have used. Though admittedly, the final boss before the credits was a lot easier than the one before it, which was a bit of a surprise. The story for Mega Dimensions is easily the strongest point, with it bringing back together the cast of characters from the base game alongside one new and one returning face. To start, Karina is easily the star of the DLC, and her return is so welcome after the impression she left compared to the rest of the gym leaders within X and Y. Here we see she is really committed to her role as Mega Evolution successor, as well as learning she has developed a friendship with AZ, something that was hinted at within the base game via the Lucario AZ gives you after his passing. And while this may not have been intended by the writers, a part of me can't help but wonder if they were hinting at Karina having gone through something traumatic, at least with just the framing of where she is in her life. But that might just be me, who knows. Early in the DLC, we learned that AZ had written to Karina and told her about the protagonist and Team MZ's efforts to save the rogue Mega Evolved Pokemon, and learned she was meant to be the one to stop Ange. Though we do not learn what prevented her from coming to Lumiose during the events of the game, I imagine it must have been something personal to have kept her from helping out. We also meet Anxia, who we learn over the course of the story is the daughter of Diantha, the champion of the Kalos League. In fact, she is the first character we meet in the DLC, as it opens up with the protagonist on the roof of Hotel Z encountering Anxia and Hooper as she asks for help making a donut so she can feed it to Hooper to go to hyperspace. Note that Anxia is like a small child, and she's just casually like, hey, let's just make a donut. I want to go to a different dimension with this little guy who summons large gold rings to open portals. We also learn she is seeking a legendary Pokemon she spotted within hyperspace in the hopes of catching it and presenting it to Diantha. It is important to note the Pokemon she saw is the legendary Pokemon Rayquaza, one with major ties to the lore of Mega Evolution. More on that later. From here, working alongside the Rust Syndicate and Quasartico Inc., the protagonist, Team MZ's leader, and Karina delve into hyperspace to survey the dimension and find rogue Mega Pokemon to save, including an Absol, Staraptor, Meowstic, and Tatsugiri. Corbo is our primary point of contact alongside Vinny and Felipe, serving as support while we go into hyperspace. We also explore Lumiose alongside Anxia, including going to the museum and seeing Anxia speculate if the Pokemon she saw had any relation to the ruins of the Temple of Sinnoh from Hisui due to the Hisui exhibit, though ultimately this is not the case since Rayquaza is not part of the Sinnoh myth. As this is going on, hyperspace is slowly expanding and the characters all start getting dreams of something telling them to stay away and begging for help. Those who have paid attention to previous Pokemon games, including Pokemon Ranger, Shadows of Almia, my beloved, may easily be able to piece together what's going on and what the root of the problem is in hyperspace. Between the surveys into hyperspace, Team MZ has to deal with antics relating to different trainers from around Lumiose, such as Liban and Gwen looking for Antia, but due to stress, Liban cannot see that she's hanging out with Team MZ. He's also dealing with Jasanth and Giselle arguing over coffee, or finding out Lita's sleep dances, even mega revolving her Starmie while doing so. Honestly, getting to see so many of the characters interact and bounce off one another in different pairings to what we see in the base game was just great, especially when there were clashes in personalities. I want to give a specific shout out to Naveen, who throughout the DLC is constantly the voice of reason, and is trying and failing to stop everyone from doing something reckless like jumping through the portals. Seriously, he needs a holiday after all the main game and DLC put him through. However, while the character interactions are fantastic, very little is done to progress learning about what is happening with hyperspace until after the player manages to calm the penultimate rogue mega Pokemon, the legendary Pokemon Heatran. I want to begin by making it clear that this is easily the best rogue mega Pokemon fight thus far. However, due to the lack of progression on learning more about hyperspace from the research in the previous survey attempts, I can't help but feel it falls a little flat. Like, I think the reveal of Heatran would have landed better had we seen signs of other legendary Pokemon being in hyperspace before we had the chance to battle them in the post-game of the DLC. Such as seeing Rayquaza or Latias and Latios and trying to find them, and by trying to find them, we learn more about hyperspace and how it works gradually. As of how it's presented, we basically get told that hyperspace is a reflection of the subconscious thoughts and dreams, and that it is expanding each time we save a rogue mega Pokemon. The day after we save Heatran, we end up trapped within hyperspace Lumiose alongside a majority of the trainers we encountered throughout the main game when we head to the Rust Syndicate's building for an important meeting. While there is not much new we learn about most of them, it is nice to see them reacting to what's going on, such as Mabel talking about how she values her own life too much to actually do research inside hyperspace. And then there's the two lovebirds. Seriously, Kanari, Gwen, just make it official already. You're already terrible at hiding it anyway, and I'm pretty sure everyone is completely fine with you two dating. Once we manage to leave, we are told by Corbo that a single Pokemon is responsible for sustaining hyperspace. This is due to said Pokemon being exposed to raw mega power from Prism Tower, causing it to lose control. So that we can save the Pokemon, we begin Operation Mega Donut. The goal is simple. Gather the needed hyperspace berries, sprinkle in some Épice Noire from the Rust Syndicate, and create a special donut which will be imbued with the power of Mega Evolution from multiple trainers in the hopes of allowing Hooper enough of a power boost to allow the player, Team MZ's leader, and Karina to venture into this specific pocket of hyperspace to save the Pokemon at the heart of the problem. After a lengthy survey to get 50,000 points, and the right berries to make the donut, which needs to specifically have 100 points in spicy, 310 in sweet, 310 in sour, 40 in bitter, and 40 in fresh, throw in an Épice Noire from the Rust Syndicate, and you have the Bad Dreams Cruller. How unsubtle. But then again, subtlety has never been Pokemon's strong suit. Honestly, the grind for these specific stats was really not great. I had so many attempts at getting a very specific berry. Never had. Wait, I need to do the same for some legendaries in the post-DLC story, don't I? More on that later. Now, with the Bad Dreams Cruller in hand and everyone gathered around Lumiose Tower, we witness the cast use their keystones to imbue the donut with the power of Mega Evolution, allowing Hooper to access a small part of its true power and allow the members of Team MZ to enter this unexplored area of hyperspace. A small detail I loved about this cutscene is seeing an echo, for lack of a better word, of Hooper Unbound appearing while opening up the portal into this new area of hyperspace. Here, we find ourselves inside a dark void. And yet, there is an island. An eerily familiar island. Welcome to the hyperspace New Moon Nightmare. Some of you may recognise the island as being New Moon Island, one of 3 islands accessible via ferry from Canalave City in the Sinnoh region, and the home of the mythical Pokémon Darkrai. Honestly, setting foot here, even as a false nightmare version of the home of the pitch black Pokémon, was enough to get me excited about what I was about to face. A Pokémon which already has a storied history, now part of the Legend of the Kalos region and Mega Evolution. As we head closer to the centre of the island, we meet a familiar face, AZ. In a heartfelt moment between the Ancient Man, the team leader of MZ, and Karina, we learn when exactly he died and that the team leader was the one to find him. But also that AZ is proud of everyone and what they've been able to do. Though Karina isn't too happy AZ died before she got back to Lumiose. Understandable. And as the ghost of AZ disappears, the team heads to the heart of the island to face the source of the nightmare. Admittedly, the fight was easier than expected, but it was a fun one. There isn't really much to analyse from a level design perspective, as like most other Rogue Mega arenas, it is just a circular space. Honestly, with the nature of the boss fights within the game, that's fine. The environmental hazards within the battles come from the Pokemon you fight themselves, as opposed to being something within the environment creating it. Similar to the Pokemon Ranger games, honestly. Mega Darkrai itself has an interesting design, drawing inspiration from solar eclipses and giving it the appearance of some sort of large, corrupted eye. I have to wonder if this eye-like appearance could be in reference to how dreams and nightmares are perceived as visions within various mythologies throughout history. And while I am not personally too familiar with them, I have seen people liken Mega Darkrai to a beholder from Dungeons & Dragons. But my knowledge of Dungeons & Dragons is primarily rooted in Critical Role, and even then, I am more of a casual fan of that series at best. I also can't help but find it funny they paralleled Pokémon Ranger Shadows of Almia, most likely unintentionally. The climax for both this DLC and that game involves the protagonists fighting Darkrai after ascending a tower, which was going to cause a disaster to make sure Darkrai does not plunge the region into a dark void. There's even a company involved in major construction work in both games as well. As a Ranger fan myself, I was just like, hey, I've seen this before. Also, I just want to mention the animation work on the Mega Darkrai reveal, where it goes up in front of the portal and eclipses it, is such a good decision from an animation standpoint. It's so cool. Little nerdy animation rant over. With Darkrai saved, Team MZ returns back to Lumiose City and celebrates. Here they speculate about how Darkrai came to reside in Lumiose and come to the conclusion that, in seeking a quiet place to hide so to not affect others with bad dreams, Darkrai found Prism Tower to be the quietest place in the city. This is in part due to the renovations being performed on the tower, leaving it uninhabited. I imagine ranting construction workers who no doubt were responsible for setting up the scaffolding and coverings around the tower did not notice the pitch black Pokemon lurking at the top. like, it hides in shadows. That's kind of what Darkrai does, so, you know, they must have never noticed. When Ange was unleashed, Darkrai was exposed to raw mega power, overcharging their Bad Dreams ability and causing the creation of hyperspace Lumios via a blending of an entire city's worth of nightmares, which ultimately results in a less scary nightmare due to everyone having different fears and traumas which visit them in their dreams. And with a final fist bump, the main story of Mega Dimensions ends. Honestly, I went in with worries of potential contradictions relating to the origins of Mega Evolution, admittedly fueled by what little speculation I saw online. I am glad this was not the case. Instead, hyperspace is ultimately something which was born out of mega power influencing a mythical Pokémon which is a fan favourite. To be very upfront, Generation 3, more specifically the story of the Hoenn region, is one which I hold close, and much of the lens through which I view the franchise is influenced by starting off in this region. So when I first saw Rayquaza show up in Anche's recollection of her first time in hyperspace, I was really excited. So admittedly, I was disappointed when they did not play into the main story. However, knowing that there were dedicated post-story quests for all three of the Hoenn region's mascot legendary Pokémon was still exciting, even if the grind... I gotta be completely honest, the grind for the post-story of the DLC really made it hard for me to continue, which meant I spent less time playing the game as much as I wanted to. I had hoped to have had this video's audio recorded by the end of December, but sadly I never hit that deadline due to the annoyances the grind presented. Like, I sat there for an hour just trying to get points and then the berries I needed as well. If there was some way to obtain the berries in a less randomized way, such as growing them, like seen in the older Pokemon games, or we did not have to have like an arbitrary time limit on our excursions into hyperspace, I think that would have made things much easier. So sadly, I do not have any footage of me going through and obtaining any of the Hoenn mascot legendaries, or learning what the game has to say about them. I will likely do a follow-up video discussing them once I motivate myself to finally catch them, mainly to discuss the lore surrounding the trio and my interpretation of the lore, especially any new lore that is introduced in ZA. So, as I was finishing up the editing process for the video, I realised I didn't touch upon any of the side missions in the DLC. Admittedly, there's so many of them that I just don't have the patience to cover them all, and I've still not done all the ones in the base game. Not to mention I can't even filter which ones are base game and which ones are DLC. So I'm not really going to be talking about the side content in this DLC. I did do the one with the 2 Mega Raichu. That one I enjoyed, but I'm biased because I like all the electric rodents. And then I also did the Mega Crabominable side quest. That one was horrible. I had like an overleveled Mewtwo that was still getting one-shot by both of them attacking at the same time. So, don't recommend doing that one unless you got like the best stuff. So yeah. At the end of it all, Mega Dimensions brings about some fantastic new Mega Forms and additional avenues to find and obtain Pokemon which in the past have been very hard to find, such as Zeraora, Magearna, and Marshadow. Admittedly, I still haven't obtained any of these. But it is held back by the tedious grind for the hyperspace surveys, which serve as roadblocks to the story and the post-game story, which, as someone who thinks it is important to discuss gameplay just as much as story, leaves me in a very mixed position on the DLC. As an addition to ZA, it requires you to interact with an inferior version of the basic gameplay loop and feels less rewarding, so I wouldn't be surprised if it turned people away. I also imagine it would have been a hard sell to people who didn't enjoy the gameplay of ZA either, given it is a big departure from the main series games previously where the combat was turn-based. But I am not the average Pokémon fan, and I have been following this series for as long as I can remember. So I was willing to stick it out, and in spite of my grievances with the grind, I did still enjoy this DLC for what I would call one of the best games in the entire franchise. It does make me wish we had another Pokémon Ranger though. Seriously, we've been waiting 16 years. I need it. Hey, if you've made it this far, I would like to thank you for watching my video. This is my first properly edited video on YouTube. It's been a bit of a learning experience. I did have some reaction videos up a few years back, but for personal reasons I've took those down. I've got a few ideas for my next video, and I'm hoping to improve my process so I can keep making videos on a semi-regular basis. If you want to keep up to date with what I'm doing, subscribing and hitting the bell would be greatly appreciated.